Welcome everybody. Thanks to all the guys behind the scene and obviously our partners in this, our signages up, and Pritam and the staff at Napier. We hope you have a fantastic night and thanks for coming and making the effort.
Thanks, Donald. Okay, so before we start, I don't really want to say too much whilst I'm up here. I just want to do a quick bit on the code of conduct. So we are two separate groups. I'm sure we have two separate codes of conduct. But basically we are a group of diverse individuals, but we're here for all one reason. It's awesome that people could make it out tonight, clearly passionate about wanting to be here, wanting to develop yourselves, wanting to learn. But we want to just make sure that everyone is cool to each other, that we don't treat anybody any differently or with any disrespect based on your gender, your religion, your size, your level of experience, your anything at all. We are awesome people. We want to keep it that way. Talking of awesome people, I'd now like to introduce Martin Burns and Melissa Perry. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. So excited to see you. Hello. Hi, Adrian.
Wow.
Hi, thanks so much for coming out tonight. I'm very excited to be here. It's like my 6th time in Scotland, so I'm really excited to bring Escaping the Build Trap here. So yeah, Martin and I are going to do a little chat about the book, give you an introduction to what it is. So to get a round of hands, how many of you are product managers? Awesome. How many of you are developers? Great, I love it. UX designers? Yes, we got one. And Agile coaches? Great, awesome. Anybody else? Who did I miss? What? Business analyst. Business analyst. Oh, analyst and consultant, okay. Project manager. Psychologist, ooh, I like it. Oh man, now I'm nervous that you're here. You're analyzing everything I'm saying. What? Okay, great. Now, no pressure. Just gonna drink my beer here and not worry about that.
Nobody noticed.
Yes. Great.
Yeah. So fabulous. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining us here, and thank you for coming to the Scottish launch of this fantastic book. This is my copy. You know it's my copy. I have written my name in it. And highlighted it very, very much. I found it amazingly insightful and actually right from the title. So what is the build trap?
Yeah, so the build trap is this scary place that companies get into where they focus so much on shipping features that they never really stop to think about, why are we doing this? Why are we building what we're building? Is there a business reason behind this? Is there customer value behind this? And we just get into this habit of the more things we put out there faster, the better. Mm-hmm. So every organization has gotten stuck in this one time or another. I hear tons of enterprise companies go, we need to think more like a startup so we can get out of the build trap. There's startups who are stuck on the build trap. The problem is that they will go out of business if they stay in the build trap, but enterprises could be in it for much, much longer. So every company has gone through this at one phase or another. It's about how do you actually escape that mentality that more is better and never tie it back to an outcome.
But working with the business in large enterprises, many folk here know I've been working with one of our local banks for the last couple of years. You go to anybody in the business and they'll tell you, but we know what we need to build. Mm-hmm. We've got this great long list. Can we just do that really, really efficiently? What's the problem with that?
Yeah, probably because that's all made up. It's a fairy tale list of things. No, but honestly, it's what happens is we never get out and really think about our end users. And especially, I work with all the banks. I've worked with so many banks. And that's a really good example of a place where we tend to just think of what are the requirements that our users want at the end of the day. We think that we know what their habits are. We think that we know what they want, but we're not really interviewing them. We're not getting close to the customer. I've worked with one client before where nobody in the technology teams or the business teams even are allowed to go talk to customers, but they think they know exactly how people invest, right? So they may be really, really close to it, but if you don't know how to go out and actually talk to your users, really understand them, you can't be sure what they're doing. I worked with a different bank a couple of years ago, and they had great stories about that. They were investigating like savings accounts, and they had this whole laundry list of things that they wanted to build on the savings account. And I got one product manager in one of my classes at a workshop at Mind the Product, one of the conferences there. And she had been working on this. She, had it handed down from her boss, said it was, said go after this. And she's building. And during the workshop, she goes, I don't think what I'm working on is actually a thing we should be doing at all. Like, I don't think I actually know enough about my customers to do this, but I'm worried about going back to my boss and saying, hey, like, I'm not sure I should be building this, because where does my job go then? I'm out of a job. I'm effectively putting myself out of a job if I say that. And she wanted to do the right thing. She wanted to work on things that were important. So she had that conversation with their boss. They went out and he said, you're right, we didn't do enough research with this. They went out and done a ton of research, realized they were not building the right thing for their customers, and they scrapped that project, and she ended up moving on to something else and getting a promotion actually for raising those topics and starting to think that way. So you see a lot of examples of that where we think we know what the customers want, but at the end of the day, like, we're not our customers, and we think about our businesses so much every day. It's what we do day in, day out, 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week that people work. You're thinking about it. The customer is not. The customer is only using your product in a moment of need. So they experience it very, very different than we do.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of starts to talk to strategy. And, we've had Simon Wardley in Edinburgh a few times lately, and, we've many of us have heard his view on strategy. What's your view of strategy? What is strategy? I mean, so many people think it's decisions made 2 layers above me.
Yeah, I think we have a really bad misconception of what strategy is in the industry. And so when I go into companies, one of the first things I do is say, let me see your strategy. And usually people hand me like a Gantt chart of all the things that they want to release in the next 5 years. And that's not a strategy, right? That's like a very well thought out plan that it's sometimes not based in reality. Sometimes there's no facts behind that, or we have never actually tested it, right? Never really looked at, is this the right thing to build? So many people think that having a strategy is just having a plan of first we do this, and second we do that, and then third we're going to build that. And in an absolutely perfect world, maybe that would work, but we don't live in a perfect world. Like that's not software development. It's full of uncertainty, right? There's so much uncertainty when you have a customer at the end of the day who's not sitting next to you every single day, and they have different needs and different circumstances. So to me, a strategy is more of a framework. It's about how do we develop a framework for people based on the current state of where we are right now. So strategies have to be grounded in reality. So where are we today? Aligned to where we want to go in the future. So we start with a vision. So where do we want to go as a business? What's out there? What's 5 to 10 years look like? And then we break it down into different levels of goals and outcomes that's actionable for each level of the team. And I think that part's really important too, turning a vision into action. That's really what strategy is all about. So I've been in organizations where they have a great vision and nobody knows how to get there. So you've got this vision over here, and then you go ask the teams, like, why are you building the things you're building, and how does it relate to the vision? And they're like, I have no idea. I don't know. Somebody just told me to build this, and I'm just going to build it. And you go up a level, and you ask the same question, and you get the same answer. And you go up a level, and you ask the same question, and you get the same answer. So, like, where does it stop, right? Like, who knows why we're building the things we're building? And that, to me, is a lack of alignment on teams. And when you don't have a cohesive strategy, you don't have alignment, and you don't reach your goals.
So how do you connect strategy to execution?
It's about a deployment process, really. So what you have to do is go in and start from, okay, where are we today? So build a current state of what is the state of things. So with all the companies that we help do strategy with right now, we pull together, like, what are the products you're selling? How much money are they making? Where are the teams deployed? How many people are on each project? How much are you selling? What's the revenue versus cost? Like, we pull all that data together to form, this is what the state of our world looks like right now. And then as a leadership team, you set, okay, if that's where we are now, this is where we want to go. We want to be, you start with like a vision and a mission for what your company wants to be. and then you look at what the factual reality is today, and then you set goals from a company level. So we work with, part of my company works with a venture capitalist right now. They're all growth stage companies. So when you look at those goals of those teams, it's all about growth. How do we achieve growth in a very rapid amount of time? So there's many different ways at a strategic intent level to break that down. You can retain your customers better, you can add more customers, or you could increase the value of the current customers that you have, right? That all contributes into growth. So at the highest level, the leadership of the business has to pull that together. What are the main driving factors or the main things that we want to focus people around? So that could be moving into the enterprise to acquire new customers, right? If you have a small or medium business. With larger enterprises, it's usually about starting new revenue lines, starting new businesses that can kind of tackle that growth. And that's why you see places like Google maintain the amount of growth that they do, because they're always spinning up new business lines or new ways to capture that growth, right? So that's why their stock keeps going up like that. So it's about really setting it from a business perspective. What are we going to do there? Then you have to align it from a product team perspective. So if we look at our whole portfolio of products, what can we add? What can we enhance? What can we kill, right, to help achieve that? And you balance that around the portfolio, you align people towards those objectives, and then you go down into the teams and say, how do we do this, guys? How do we get there? And that's where all your road mapping comes in.
So that sounds almost like a sense of mission in a military sense.
Yeah.
And you're saying, here's what we're trying to do. Now, organization, how do we do that?
Yeah.
So how does that work in a delivery organization?
Yeah, it's very similar to that, and I think the principle does come out off of like that mission command type work, and that's how you can achieve independent thinking at scale as well. I'll say like I've done it at a company that had 5,000 people, so we did this company had no vision, don't have strategic intents, nothing. There was no strategy anywhere, and we took it and we remorphed it so that they could deploy it. How do you get there? It has to start at leadership, right? You have to start with leadership, and they have to put time into figuring out, okay, what is our vision if we don't have one, right? And then what are our strategic intents? And then they have to get the next line together to figure out, what are the product initiatives? And you work up and down and horizontally to do that. A lot of enterprise organizations I go into, everybody's siloed off in their little business lines, and it's like, this is my P&L, and I will never talk to anybody over there, even though you have dependencies, or you guys could be working together on something that's much bigger, but they won't talk to each other, they won't collaborate across it, because you see yourself as, this is my team, and I'm in charge of this business, but I will never go over there. So one thing that we do to start getting there is just literally throw those teams together. Like throw those leadership people in a room and make them prioritize against each other. Make them all have the same goals. So one of the things I did with the team that had like 5,000 people, we had 6 or 7 leaders, and they all planned individually, and they all said, okay, this is what I'm going to do this year. And instead we put them all in a group, and we said, you guys can only have 3 goals for the year. There's 7 of you. What are those goals going to be? And that makes them prioritize and think about, how do we do this holistically, instead of what's my thing, what's this thing, what's that thing, right? And then they go into the teams at a lower level and figure out, how does my product help? How does this product help? How does that product help? But at the top level, you minimize it so that everybody's aligned at the bottom. And
then you end up reducing the organization's whip. Yep. And actually having focus and being able to get something done for a change.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fantastic place to be. But of course, we all work in massive uncertainty. Even if it's just competitors. And again, I'm going to use the bank's example of fintechs trying to take all the profitable bits of their value chain away. Meantime, regulators are coming out with new ideas of what should be on a frequent basis. How do you operate in that kind of uncertainty when you have a vision, and that vision is, because people's behaviour doesn't change that rapidly, and especially if you're doing large organisation finance. But the climate and landscape that you're operating in is very, very changeable. How do you operate? How do you have that learning? Yeah, I think when things change like that, it's also an opportunity as well. So there's businesses that have been built off the backs of regulations. Like I worked at a healthcare company in the United States, and when when President Obama came in,
first thing that they did is they put down a mandate that everybody had to move to an electronic health record system. And everybody was using paper at the time. All doctors were just scribbling their notes on paper. So this mandate came down and they had 10 years to do it. So what happened? A bunch of electronic health record systems spun up, and the people who were the first movers ended up really well, right? Because it was a land grab. Like, how many doctors are there in the world, like in the United States? Millions, right? Hospitals, doctors, everybody there. So with that regulation now, you know, highly uncertain environment, but like we've got Epic became like one of the largest companies operating in the United States on the market cap perspective off the backs of that regulation. The company I was working at was $8 billion a year in revenue, right? Like off the backs of that regulation. So we look at regulation in large companies as like a constraint and like, oh, we can't do this because we're regulated, right? Meanwhile, startups are out there making bank off your regulations because you can't react fast enough. So it's one of those things where I look at that stuff and I say, yeah, it is highly uncertain. And we have to make sure that we are so in tune with the market. And that's why it's important to operate this way. That's why it's important to be able to react quickly, because when you have that kind of uncertainty, if you can't react, you'll lose.
And how do you build the organizational capability to be able to have that reactiveness while still keeping an eye on the strategic intent, the strategic goal?
Yeah, I think you have to really have the balance there of leadership having the foresight to be able to say like, hey, this is a direction things are going in, we have to move it this way. Knowing when it's a fluke or when it's important. I've seen conversations at companies about regulations all the time, like should we react to it? In the United States, there was a huge regulation thing that wasn't quite hitting. And so at this company, there was a debate about should we stay for fee for service. So in the United States, when you go see a doctor, they get paid a fee. So you show up, they get money. And then when they want to move, the regulation and the environment and the government keeps saying they want to move for fee for value, which means like unless you get healthy, the doctor doesn't get paid, right? Like they have to show that you're trending that way, which sounds awesome, but that's going to completely change how these healthcare companies operate, like completely change it. So the company, right, the leadership at this company is looking at it going, we know this might hit. All of our stuff is built for fee for service. How do we start looking at fee for value in case this hits, right? And they were having that conversation early. They were talking about it, and they were also figuring out how can we spin up some teams, right, to go investigate it and see if there's legs there. So a lot of strategy is about poking and testing and prodding and seeing if you can really understand if there's some momentum around that. And I think there's one piece about it of being able to have the foresight to test it and learn and know that you should get ahead of those things, right? Some companies will just bury their heads in the sand and not want to react, and they're like, whatever, we're big enough, like, somebody else will do it. And then the other side of it too is then how do you react, right? So how, if let's say fee for value does happen, how does this company change course and react? All that starts at the leadership level with them saying, okay, this is a thing that's coming, we're going to place a bet. And I think of strategy as a series of bets, right? It's not about we're 100% certain that this is going to happen, but there's things in our portfolio of bets that we're pretty certain that this is going to result in revenue. Then there's things that we're like, yeah, this is going to help catapult our business to a new level, right? Like there's some uncertainty there, but we're going into a new phase of growth. And then there's these bets where they're kind of moonshots, right? They're things that we're looking at and leaving space open for innovation. So we're building a portfolio based on these 3 horizon models, really is what McKinsey calls it, where we're looking at what do we have to do now to sustain our business as it currently exists? What do we do to build our business for the next phase of growth, right? So what are the things that go there? And then third, how do we reserve some capacity somewhere to look at what we should be doing instead? And that's how companies like Amazon operate as well. So that's how you get things like the Alexa and voice control and stuff like that. They take little teams, they have them go out and explore this, build business models and concepts around it. And these take years. Like they spent 7 years building Alexa before it was launched. So they take that time, they really test it, they try to figure out what sticks, and then when they find something in the market, they launch it. So you don't usually hear about how long those things take or that people are dedicating time to it, but that's how they do it. That's how they build in this kind of innovation.
the overnight success that took 5 years, 7 years to build.
Yep.
Like all overnight successes. And occasionally realising the thing that you thought was going to be fantastic is just a dumb idea that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
One of the examples you have in the book is Netflix and the thing we all know as Roku.
Yep, exactly. So the Netflix story with Roku is that Netflix has one of the best strategies too, and I write about it in the book a lot. I think they're really good at following strategy, and I think we're lucky because Gibson Biddle, who was a VP of product there, he talks a lot about this and he writes a lot about it. So a lot of companies do great strategy, but they won't tell us what they did. They're like, it was magic because we want to appear smart. But Netflix writes it out in a really logical way that you can follow, and it makes total sense. So their story there is that they were really big in the DVD market, but they were always really attached to their vision. And the vision was never about being big in DVDs, right? Their vision was about getting entertainment in the most convenient way with no fees and delighting customers, right? So they looked at that vision and they said, what are all the different ways we could do that? DVDs were what was available then, but as the internet got better and as download speeds got faster, they realized they could deliver more convenience through the web. So now we can download movies and watch them and stream them. So that's where they started shifting when they looked at that. So then their strategy became get big on DVDs, own streaming, expand worldwide. And now it's original content is the fourth piece. So you look at their history and you go through their strategy that way. Now, when they were back in streaming, the story goes, they were trying to figure out why only 10% of people were really streaming movies. They're like, it's out there, download speeds are much faster, like everything's going really, really well. Why are people not streaming movies? Like, it would make sense that they would because it gets to you much faster than waiting for a DVD. So they started investigating and talking to their customers, and they realized it's because the only way to watch the movies at Netflix at the time was on your laptop. And where do you watch movies? On TV, right? Like not on your laptop, like not on your screens that way. So they're going, oh, we're going to place a bet here. We bet that if we can help get people access to our movies and streaming on different devices, they're going to watch more. So they said, how do we do that? There's no internet capable TVs yet. There's no other ways to do that. So first, what they did was approach PlayStation, because PlayStation was about to launch their product with a new app store. So they were like, we want Netflix to be on that. People can access it through their TVs then. So they went to PlayStation and they said, hey, we want to do this. And PlayStation said, absolutely not. And that was because they're owned by Sony. And Netflix was taking over all of Sony's revenue. And Sony was like, no way. I am not giving you more ammo for your fire here. So what they did instead was like explore another option. So they said, we'll build our own device to allow streaming on TV. So they spent a year doing it. They had a whole hardware team doing it. They built this device that would plug into your TV. And then the day before it launched, they pulled the plug. They had like tons and tons of people signed up for it, and they pulled the plug. And they talk about it. They say that they pulled the plug and they made the executive decision to do that because it really wasn't, it didn't align with their strategy. Their strategy was not to be a hardware company. Their strategy was to get people the best entertainment in the most accessible and easy way, the fastest way as well too, right? No fees. And when they looked at that strategy, they said, if we build a hardware device, what we're going to do too is lock ourselves out of being able to partner with anybody else. So as we get bigger, as there's other hardware devices in this market, we'll never be able to be the app on that hardware device because we'll have our own, and we don't want to compete there. So they scrapped it, and they spun it off, and that became the Roku. And what they did instead was go to Xbox. When Xbox started to launch their follow-up to PlayStation, and then within 1 year, they had 1 million people with Netflix on their TVs. So it was so they really looked at that. I love it because it shows you the choices that strategy gives you, right? And sometimes you do take a wrong path, but you still come back from it. And Netflix has like a series of weird things that they did, but they always came back from it because they stayed true to their vision. They weren't afraid to say like, yep, we screwed up on that one, but no harm, no foul. We're going to go in the right direction and provide you more value, right? And they do right by their customers in that way too. So they're always really anchored to that vision. Their strategy follows it, and then they explore different options on really how to get there.
Fantastic. another thing I love about the book is it really treats product management as a profession. I think, and many of us in the room would, put our hands up and say we are Agilists to one level or another. And I think the Agile industry over N years has put huge emphasis on the Scrum Master role and the development that's from that. Me as an example of that. But it always seems to be very weak on the product side of it.
Yeah.
What's the difference? I mean, many of us know the product owner role. What's the difference between that as a role that we all know and feel many things about, and product management as a profession, as a career, as a whole? Profession is probably the best word.
Profession's a good one. Yeah, career. Yeah, so I came to product management not from Agile. So I was a waterfall product manager. And I had learned, I was working, first I worked at a software company that did a platform for financial research. So I was a product manager there, very waterfall. I just made beautiful specs and threw them over to developers. And then never knew what happened to them after that. Basically, 4 months later, they'd be like, "Oh, it's done," and I'm like, "Cool, let me go test it." And it was wild to me, when I got into Agile, because I was like, "Wow, this is a really different way to work." But I started there, and then I went to a startup, did the same thing. I honestly didn't know that product owners existed until I was giving a talk and somebody raised their hand about, cool, this is a great talk on product management. And I was calling it lean product management at the time. Honestly, I just think it's good product management now. But somebody raised their hand and they're like, well, what's the difference between this and product owners? And I was like, what's a product owner? I've never heard of that before. What's going on? And we had been doing Scrum in a really lackadaisical way, right? It was not we had an Agile coach, and it was just since I was the product manager, I was also the product owner, but he never called me that. He was just you do this because that's your role. I didn't change roles. That was just my job. And then the developers came in, and we did some, we did the backlog grooming, we did the estimations, and we loved it because we had a really hard time talking to each other before. We were not friends. I kept trying to shove 45-page specs down their throat, and they were like, hell no, I'm not doing this. And I did not change my approach. I was just no, do it. I told you to. So at that point, we were all tensions were high, but we all really wanted to build great things. So we had a common goal there. And when they said try Scrum, I was I have no idea what that is, but anything's better than me fighting with everybody every day and them fighting with me. Nobody wants to do this, so let's give it a shot. And it just forced us to talk, right? We just had very long conversations, and they were really long when we were first, our backlog sessions were 3 days at the beginning when we were trying to figure stuff out. And that was fine because it forced us to really work together to figure out our stuff. And then we became a great team. And still to this day, the best team I've ever worked on was that team. And we built so much trust, and it was great. But again, that went on a whole tangent, but I didn't call myself a product owner. I didn't know what this was. And I found out that there was a lot of people who were coming into Agile and becoming product owners not from the same background that I had, which was traditional product management, waterfall product management. But the thing is, in Silicon Valley and in these software companies, even Google or Microsoft or stuff, there's been product managers for 20 years, 30 years, right? This is not a new role, but it's very, very new for some companies because they've never had somebody there operating in this before. So when Scrum came in to a lot of large organizations, I think when Agile came in, they looked at it as oh, this is a brand new thing. Let's just take all of our business analysts and project managers and turn them into product managers. Easy, right? Because all they do is go through a backlog and take care of developers. And they're missing the meat and the strategy that's really behind that role. And to me, product management is a career. We hire chief product officers into our companies with the venture capitalists that I work with. There are stages to product management. And I've worked at so many enterprise companies that just think product stops at the Scrum team level. You just have product here, and then it just turns into the business later on. And that does it a disservice, right? Because I don't think these companies really understand what product is. So they come from a project background where everything was let's go through a project management office, PMO. let's, give us some money and spin up that team this year. And I have a company that we've worked with that does this every year. And it could be 5,000 people that spun up that year to work on that initiative. And what happens is they build software, but nobody owns that software going forward. So they build it and then they walk away from it. And then they build it again and then they walk away from it. And I had one company that I asked at one point, like, one of the core parts for people to sign up for their product, right, which was financial instruments, was never owned by anybody. Like, it was literally the way that people signed up to use their financial instrument, and nobody was running it. Like, nobody owned it and nobody knew who owned it. And I'm like, what if it breaks? What happens when it breaks? Like, or do you know if people are signing up? Have you ever looked at the conversion funnel? So it's not this growth, it's not a growth mindset. Project management is not a growth mindset. A growth mindset with products is really like, let me build one thing that's repeatable and scales, right? I don't want to build 45,000 things every single time something comes up, right? I want to build something that scales, something that's repeatably sellable. If you're in a financial company like a bank, I think this is where a lot of the disconnect comes from, because your product at a bank is your financial stuff, right? It's like a mortgage is your product, right? It's not software. But software enables the value for the mortgage. And we have to think about building software around that, or how to get people easier access to the mortgage, better mortgages, more clarity in how to pay off the mortgages, right? How do we use software to scale those services that we traditionally did with people so that we can deliver value faster, right? That's how they should be thinking about it. But instead, that project mindset kind of took over. So I honestly think until enterprises change that mindset from project to product, it's going to be really hard for them to establish careers for product management. But if you look anywhere elsewhere in the industry where they do believe in software, they understand software is key, software is their product, like, there is a path for careers for a product manager that goes all the way up to the CEO.
And when you have a complicated product like a mortgage, and all the services around mortgage, thinking home ownership in a broader sense, clearly that's too much for one person to retain in their head in the amount of detail that you would need. So how do you achieve that scaling?
Yeah, it's about really distributing teams around it. So we organize everybody around value streams. So if you have a mortgage product that you're selling at your company, what's the whole value stream that helps you deliver on that mortgage product? So it's about, and it's never the same for every company. Every company is set up a little bit differently. But in this case, you'd have several product managers. So we usually have product managers working with the teams on the bottom on what's the most important things to get today. Then we have directors of product who own kind of a scope around a really key component to delivering that mortgage. Then we have a VP of product who's looking at the whole strategy for the mortgage. And then we have, the head of mortgages at the bank is usually how it rolls up. So we have different levels that are reporting into it, and we have coverage across the mortgage system, and we have tons of brains working on understanding that. Then we also have the SMEs. So product's not going to be figuring out what if somebody comes in with these qualities, what kind of mortgage do I give them? That's not product's responsibility. That's a financial thing. So those are our subject matter experts who come in and put that science in there. And product people and their teams are responsible for figuring out, okay, now that we have that science, how do I factor that into our software so that when somebody applies, I get them the right mortgage, right?
And we start looking at what's the business opportunity that this bit of analysis has told us. How can we translate that into better outcomes, whether it be reduced costs, increased revenue, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So the product managers are always really aligning themselves towards those outcomes from a business perspective. So if you're looking at how do I get more first-time home buyers, right? Maybe your objective for mortgages is get more first-time home buyers to choose your mortgage, right? Something like that. Then you're looking at how do I deliver that better? How do I get more people in? How do I make sure that those people are approved for the right mortgages? How do I learn more about them, right? And trying to figure out from a perspective, how do we enable this whole value stream to deliver?
And if I'm kind of sitting on the top of this, if I'm head of mortgages, effectively I'm own that whole product set on behalf of the bank. How do I balance between, because I'll be given a set of, I'm sure that, I can argue for more should needs arise, but essentially, large bank will have several hundred million currency units of your choice to spend on this. But there is ultimately a degree of fixed potness. So how do I balance between all the needs in a changing environment?
Yeah, I think that's a lot about like capacity planning and like staying focused to your goals. So what I see a lot of organizations do too is like they peanut butter their people across like every single thing that they could possibly doing. And every size of organization does this too. It's really common in startups. Like I've had meetings where I look at everything and it's like, oh, 10% of our people here, 10% here. And if you do that over like 40 initiatives, right, nothing gets done. Nothing will get out the door. So when you align back to strategy, like you're putting a bunch of people around a specific like mission that makes a really big impact. So you want to make sure that you have enough push to go in one direction, because otherwise it's going to take, well, I guess the reason why you want to do that is because if you have everybody peanut buttered across a bunch of stuff, it's going to take years to actually deliver on that value. Whereas there are some things, right, that you can put more people around, have concentrated effort, get it out sooner, see those returns sooner. And that's really how we should be thinking about prioritizing. So I always like to think about like cost of delay with prioritizing. If we don't do this now, right, or if we put 3 people on this and it's going to take 3 years to release, versus if we put 40 people on this and it's going to take 6 months to release, how much money are we actually losing by waiting 3 years instead of getting it out in 6? And you prioritize that against all your different initiatives that are really coming up. But you have to balance it. It's like it's a cadence thing. So one of the things that we did at companies is set up a cadence for reviewing strategy and seeing where we are. So every quarter, we started looking at our progress towards our what I call options, which are all the different things the teams are doing towards our product initiatives. So the big pushes we want to make on product. How close are we? Are we there? Did anything change in the market? Do we have to reprioritize? What does our balance of our portfolio look like? And then you do it on a leadership level too, where you can make that decision, like say, hey, for this initiative, we're almost done. We don't need 80 people on this right now. We need 10 people to shore it up and finish it, right? Where are we going to put the rest of those 80 people? What's the next one coming up? How do we keep balancing it? So the problem organizations usually get into is they do yearly planning, and that's where all the headcount goes. And it's like, once that headcount is allocated, you shall never touch that headcount, right? The headcount can never move. Everybody's got to be in their thing. And when you only do that once a year, how do you change to changing markets, right? How do you change to uncertainty if you're only allocating once a year? So we usually do it by funding product lines and teams rather than funding projects, because if that project goes south or you realize that project's not the right thing to do, you don't have to change your whole funding model. You just give the team something else to work on.
And then you don't get into this is my team working on my project, and you discover that in a business unit, you've got 300 of those, each with 10 people, each working 10% of their time on this project, and you wonder why nothing gets done.
Yeah, big time.
You start seeing that your typical enterprise from idea to impact 2-3 years, and it just happens again and again and again. Mm-hmm. The idea of being able to have that focus just sounds absolutely amazing. Only organizations could do it.
But they can, Martin. But they can. They can read my book. It's true, but there are organizations that operate that way, like large software companies that are newer, that are like the ones that you see in the news all the time, right? Like that's how they operate. Like they fund their product lines, they fund the teams, they don't fund like initiatives. Even a company I worked at that we had to do a transformation, and they still, budgeting wasn't a problem for them because they funded the product lines. Like it was never a problem because we could change the strategy up within that product line and it was totally fine. And we'd always reevaluate it. So if we had to take a team and put them on something else, like it wasn't a big deal, right? And it didn't turn this whole thing upside down. So
allowing informed grown-ups to make decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, who'd have thought that? So in that context, what does a great roadmap look like?
I don't know if there is one way to say a great roadmap. So I get a lot of people asking me for examples of roadmaps all day. And what they usually mean is show me what it looks like on a piece of paper. And I honestly can't show you that because I've seen many, many formats that work. But the thing that all these formats have in common is that they're not specific Gantt chart related, we're due this project by the end of the day. They are more focused on themes of what we're building. So instead of specifying all these different deliverables, we have a theme of what we're going to put out there and a big problem that we're going to solve for our customers. And I will say too, roadmaps grow over time. So if you have good strategy deployment, you usually have different levels of roadmaps. So when I work with executive teams, they don't really care what the teams are working on from a feature perspective. Like it's so much work, right? Imagine you've got 350, sometimes 1,000 teams. Like I don't want to know the 1,000 things people are working on. I want to know what's it going to do? So at an executive level, when we talk about roadmaps and initiatives, we keep it really high level, right? Like we're going to satisfy enterprise customer needs this year and try to win over, a couple big strategic accounts, right? That might mean 50 to 100 teams are working on that, but that's summing it up. So that's how we do the strategy deployment. When you get down to the team level, that's usually about looking at what we call options, which are, what are the things that we're actually doing? So what are the solution hypotheses that we're actually building towards what are the product initiatives, the problems we're solving for our customers? So we align those different things with roadmaps. We keep it very theme-based so that it's more like I'm satisfying this need for our customer until we have more certainty that it's the right thing, and then you can refine it a little bit more in your statements. So I think roadmaps get refined over time. We also did something too with companies that I really, really like, and I thought it helped so much. We did this first with the healthcare company, and now I think it works really, really well, where if you label the different things you have on your roadmap with what stage it's at, so we'll say this is very uncertain, it's an alpha stage. We're still testing it and we will probably kill it. So some people are giving us feedback on it, we're doing some experiments, but there is a 80% chance that this might die. So do not sell it, right? Don't go sell it, sales team, right? These things are in beta stage. We're pretty sure that this is the right solution, but we're fine tuning it, right? We know what the problem is, it exists, we have data. We have proof from our customers. We are fine tuning the solution with a group of customers to make sure that it's the right customers. So you may talk about it in theory, right? Because it is coming. Don't talk about specifics, but yes, we will solve that problem for people, but don't sell it yet because we're not sure when it will be ready. And then we have generally available, which is we know it's getting built. We have more certainty around a rough time frame. I can't give you a specific date, but it's going to be done maybe in Q4, right? Q4, pretty good. We're at the end there, right, to build it. And yes, you can go out to the market and sell those types of things, right? So that's how we kind of communicate with sales and the rest of the company by labeling what's on the roadmap of what levels of certainty it's on. And as it becomes more certain, they get flushed out more. And what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Many of us work in large organizations. Mm-hmm. Who should read the book? Because we're going to be giving out a whole bunch of copies real soon now. Who should we take this to and say, you got to read this? Whose nose should we put it under?
I really think it starts at, so it depends what kind of company you're on. It starts, any way to get into a better product company starts at leadership. And the companies that don't have leadership buy-in, right, sometimes it takes a while to get there, but if they don't have leadership buy-in, I honestly don't see them making this transition. And I think that's key. It's a terrible thing to hear when you're not in leadership position, because you're oh crap. But it's true. And I tell leaders that too. I have CEOs ask me or heads of these business lines, and they'll say, oh cool, I want you to do that, but we're not really ready for this whole transformation, but I've got all these people who are now product managers, go train them. And I tell them when they say that, if you're not willing to make these changes at your level, those people are going to get trained and they will leave. And it's happened. I've trained people and they have left and they went better places. That's what's going to happen, because people will realize they can't operate and be successful in those organizations. So it's super critical that leaders read it, all the way up to a CEO. I have a CEO called me and was like, this changed my life yesterday. And it was really fun to go. He did a whole offsite with his leadership team, did all the strategic intents, got it all down, and really, really blew his mind. So they get excited about this stuff. So definitely leadership, but also every level of product manager. It's for the people who just became product owners and they were what does this mean, right? Because it's supposed to give you a framework and show you like this is a path and there's many different pieces on it and it goes way beyond Scrum, right? It's not just about backlog grooming, story points. It's really about seeing yourself as a strategic partner, right? Like you are the person who is really bridging that business value and customer value and enabling a team to go after that and build products that satisfy that. And that's absolutely core. So I think it's for every level product manager, definitely leaders to help them see what a good organization is to set it up. That's why I wrote it. I started actually writing this 3 years ago as like a how to do product management book. And then I was getting into these organizations and we'd solved the how to do product management problem, and then it was a leadership problem, and then it was a strategy problem, and then it was an org design problem, and then, and it kept bubbling up, and that's why I wrote it this way, because I think there's so much information out there about how to do product management well. It's all siloed in different places. It's definitely hard to find, but there is a lot of bodies of knowledge out there of those different things. What there isn't information on, I think, is for leaders to figure out how to get that way. And that's why I wanted to write it this way, because I wanted to give a framework for like, what does it mean to be a product manager?
And it is a fantastic articulation of that. Now, I've just had a clock pointed at me. If I keep on asking questions, we're going to be here till goodness knows what time. And I know other people will have questions as well. So at this point, I'm going to shut up and open it for questions. And we have the world's best throwable mic.
I hope everybody
and you talk in
can
here.
catch.
Who has a question?
Oh man. Ooh, that was good.
Hello. Hi Melissa, great talk. So I guess the question for myself is that a lot of the things you've been talking about have been based on the assumption that people might actually want your product. Now that probably sounds quite cryptic. So I work in a large financial institution. My product is a policy. So we can take a product management approach to product development approach to the policy as well. But what happens when your users don't actually want your product but they need it reluctantly? Is there anything that would change in your approach or any advice you could give in that space?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of products that users want. I mean, users don't want, but they need, right? Like in the US, it's healthcare. We need healthcare. And you have to buy it, and I don't want to spend like a lot of money on healthcare, but I have to, right? And it's the policies around it that you can try to optimize. So like Oscar Health is a company in the US who tried to make that better. They were like, how do I make it easier for people to sign up? How do I get it better care? How do I give them like free doctor services, right? If they're in this policy to kind of like do that. So it's not necessarily, product doesn't mean that somebody like wants it, right? It's about a need too, right? So your policy fills a need for somebody. It's about how do you deliver on that need in the best way you possibly can for that user, in their best interest, right? But also in a way that like satisfies them, right? That covers their bases. So that's kind of how I look at it. I feel like car insurance is the same type of thing, right? Like there's so many things out there where it's not something that you necessarily want, but you need it, right? So you still have to design it in that way. And there's attributes, and that's the part, right? Those things that people need, but don't necessarily want, that's where you get your competitive edge, because instead of just satisfying the need, how do you do it in a way that kind of blows their mind, right? How do you think about what are the different levers I can pull that would like surprise them and go, wow, I'd rather do that one instead of this other competitor over here because they know I need this, but they're doing it in a way that satisfies me much better.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Jerome. For all these years, we have been working in project-based models, and there's been a pressure to get into feature teams and product-centric models. How do you decouple product-based characteristics from a project so that we understand what we are doing?
Can you explain a little bit more? Like, what do you mean by decouple?
How do you decouple a product characteristics from a project-based requirement so that we understand the difference clearly between a product and a project?
Okay, to understand the difference between it. Okay, so the difference between a project and a product is that So I think about it as a couple different ways, and I literally just explained this the other day to a company that is a project-based company. You have products that sustain over time, right? There are software products that will never change. So if you imagine like Airbnb, for example, right? Let's just take them. There are products in Airbnb, software products or features of that, right? Which is like search, being able to show those homes, being able to book a home, right? There's things that will never change on that site that make up these different products. It's probably at a higher level of value stream there. Now, there are projects that we do as a company to enhance those, to move it forward. So it's not necessarily about, it's about organizing around products so that there's coverage around each one of those, and we grow those things and optimize them, right, through the different projects that we do to do that. So projects are a short-term push to optimize, add, or remove, right, like a product, like to build it around a product. But the thing that project-based mindsets really get into is that they don't see those products as lasting after the project, right? We usually drop it and we move a bunch of people off it. So I had a client like the other day who was overseeing like she overseed something around like a value stream, but it was just her. She had no developers on it whatsoever because we had IT over here and business over here, right? And she's got no developers on the team, so it's just her. And she's like, all these regulatory requirements are coming up. Nobody's on my project, right? I have to go fight to see if I can get some people to fix it. Now, when you look at her product though, like the value stream she oversees, it's one of the most important things for that company to operate. But they were like, oh, well, we built it and now we're done, right? Like it's out there. So now we don't have to do anything, and they're not thinking about sustaining it or growing it, and nobody's actually managing it from a standpoint of looking at it and going, hey, is it actually optimized? Are people calling into the help desk because they can't use it? Are people leaving us because this is too hard to use, right? Like they're not looking at the factors around it to see if there's any optimization there. And then when things come up like the regulatory requirements or whatever, they can't actually fix it because nobody's organized around it because they went off to do other projects.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yep.
Okay. What else?
It's
Maybe one over this side?
Love it.
Bob it.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That was a really far throw, by the way. There we go.
Hi, Melissa. You talked about sustainability. What about sustainability of the mindset? So you talked about a scenario whereby perhaps leadership weren't quite there and the good people leave. So what about sustainability in that context?
Do you mean keeping people or keeping leadership? Like, I mean, leadership keeping people?
How do you ensure that this new approach is sustained within an organisation as people come and go, leadership changes, experience moves to different parts of the business?
Yeah, I think it's about making sure that you have a core team there who really get it and then building it into your values, right? If it's not part of your values, so I see so many transformations treated as like a 1 to 2 year project. They were like, we're gonna go Agile this year. And I was like, what are you gonna do next year? And they were like, well, we'll be done with it by then. So we won't be Agile anymore. Or we will have made it, right? Like we're Agile now. And you know, that's never the fact. So it's like we treat all those types of things as a project, right? Rather than a way that we should be operating and building it into the DNA. One of the biggest mistakes I see companies do, and it's something I advise all of them to do, when they move to a product-based model, right? Like when they want to have product managers, they usually bring me in to train like 350 to 1,000 people who have never done product management before. So my team comes in, trains everybody. I work with leadership team to like do the org design and the strategy stuff. But when I go in, when I say like, I will only come and help you if we do this org design stuff together, because what happens is they try to change everybody in the organization, but they never bring in anybody who's done it before. And you cannot sustain the training, right, of 1,000 people who have never done this before if you have nobody around them once we leave, and we're not going to stay there forever, to help them. So I always say, like, you have to bring in a mix of people who've done this before at leadership levels, right? And team levels, right? To get them there, and then you'll learn from each other. It's not about replacing your entire team. It's about having a good distribution. And that's absolutely key for sustaining this. So I don't think it's about, so I think it's about a mix of, if you want to make it sustainable for the long term, bring in new people, right? Mix them with the old, get that to catch on, start turning it into your DNA, and don't treat it like a project. We got one behind you too. Yeah.
Quite similar thing. So, do you have examples when you went through the company, all fantastic ideas, transformation, or whatever term we can use, on a go, and it started falling down, and they say, no, it's not for us, and they just made a step back? Have they tried to go one more time through the same route, or they just completely move? No.
100%. I don't think I've seen it happen where, like, it falls back. And sometimes it doesn't catch on. Sometimes it catches on in small places and it doesn't catch on everywhere. It's a long process, right? I think ING has one of the best stories. They've been doing their Agile transformation for 8 to 9 years, right? And they say, we tried it the first time for a year and it failed. And nobody wanted to hear the word Agile again, and they were not up for it. And then it took about 2 years for that to settle in, and then they tried it again, and then it stuck, right? Because they approached it differently. And I think that's going to be the story with every large organization that's going to do this. I think there's going to be this hate period that's like, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore. And then it's going to calm down a little bit, and then it's going to go back into like, oh, let's take the principles of how this actually helps us and works. I know a ton of large organizations that are in the middle of that flux, or coming back to the other side, but also in that tension of, I don't think we should do this. And I think it's a growing pain, and it's a culture thing, right? It's anytime you're going to go through one of these things too, like one of these transformations, there's always going to be churn. You're always going to have people unhappy, because in a lot of places that I work with too, a lot of the people have been there for like 40 years. So you're coming in and you're telling somebody who's been there for 40 years that they have to change their role. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. I'd be like, no, I'm doing all right now. And I have some people who are really excited to try something new and do it, but it is frustrating, right? Like, you've been doing everything the way that you have been doing it, and then management comes in and blows it up, and they go, oh, we're going to go this way. Do it, right? And it becomes not for good, like, sometimes they don't put good reasons out there. The way that I see it, like, be more successful in the teams that we've helped, is it grows organically. We have leadership really involved. Where I see it fail too, and I've seen a couple of them fail, leadership has it delegated, right? They go, and I've had that happen to me too. Like, I've been brought in by like CEOs, and they're like, oh, you go fix it. And I'm like, I'm a consultant. Like, I don't work here, right? How am I gonna, what happens when I leave in a year, right? Like, what are you gonna do? So they delegate, right? Instead of really owning it. And I think if you wanna make it sustainable and you want people to believe in you, like, as a leader, the number one thing you could do is like live and breathe that every day yourself.
Fantastic, thank you.
We got time for maybe 2 more questions, and there was certainly one at the back.
Yes.
There.
Thank you. I used to work in product management in New Zealand, and it was fantastic. I can't say enough good things about it. But in that scenario, we worked as a product management team. We worked for a head of product. We lived and breathed product management. We didn't have to worry about the kind of day-to-days of running those things. It was all about tracking and where are the opportunities in the market. I would like to take out some of the best things of product management and put them into the company that I'm in now. But I've been told, no, there's not the opportunity to have full-time product managers as part of that. Is it something that people can do as part of their jobs?
So I've had people ask me this question all the time, and it's a rough answer. So I see two paths, right? And this is my advice for anybody who's thinking about, can I change my organization, or like, what can I do? When you're a product manager and you're not at a C level or a VP level, right? Like, you don't have a seat at the table up there to change people's minds. There's 2 paths for you. One, you can go into the path of, I want to be the best product manager in the world. I want to really focus on my craft, and I want to do awesome stuff. And if you want to be that type of product manager, I would say leave, honestly. Go find a place that really respects you and understands product management so you can hone your craft. But there is another route, right? And that's becoming a transformation agent. So if you want to be a change agent route, which is basically what I ended up doing, right? You have to be in there for the fight, right? And there are things you can do, right? You can start demonstrating what good product looks like. Like when I started experimenting in companies and doing this myself, like I didn't really ask for permission. I just went and did it. And I have a lot of like product managers I advise who say like, oh, but my boss won't let me. And I'm like, did you just do it, right? Like you might get yelled at, but you're certainly, as long as you don't like blow everything up, right? You won't get fired, you might get reprimanded. But they also, if you have the data, leadership listens. Like I work with CEOs all day long, and all their teams tell me like, oh, my CEO doesn't want to listen to me, or they can't be swayed, or, you know, like this person doesn't get it. But I talk to them all day long and they do get it. It's just that you have to speak their language, right? So when I go to CEOs, I don't tell them like to explain like being product led. Like I don't come in and say like, you need product managers. I go, what are the objectives for your company? What are you trying to do? Right? Oh, this is why you can't do them right now, right? And you put it into terms that they really can grasp and understand, and you show them how it's going to achieve their goals, and you help them get there. So if you do the change agent route, which is totally possible, I have a friend who started out as like an engineering manager in a very large international bank, and he became the CTOs of America and Europe because he wanted to change stuff, right? Like he was like, I'm going to learn the politics. He's like, I hate politics, but I'm going to learn it, and I am going to change this because I'm so sick of all this budgeting process and my team's not being able to do everything. And he did. He went all the way up to the CTO of Americas and Europe, and he changed that whole division of the organization. And it was only like a span of 5 or 6 years that really took him to do that, because he was like, I am fixing this, and that became his mission, right? And he figured out how to play the game, and he just made that his mission to get there, and then the whole part of the organization changed.
Okay, one last question. Okay, so we will have mingling time after this.
Yes.
So this will not be, the absolute end of the possibility to ask any questions. But in terms of us all sitting here in our seats, perhaps one more. Who's going to get it?
Yes! That was great. It made it.
That was really good, thank you very much. I had a quick question around, I guess a lot of what we work with are kind of large.
Talk to the top of the
I didn't realise it was a microphone.
Talk to the top.
It's the top.
There we go. So I guess a lot of the organisations we work with are large traditional organisations. A lot of them at the moment have offline products. They're delivered through traditional channels. How do you handle introducing product management from a digital perspective into those organisations initially, where the offline equivalent may already be owned or may not already be owned, but what you're trying to do is to transform it in the online space, so to introduce something new that's kind of fit for digital?
It's I work with all those organizations. The same thing as a bank, right? Like a credit card is not a digital product, right? It's a physical product that you get, and it's a financial instrument for you to save. So like the first thing is about aligning yourselves around those products and thinking about the value streams that it takes to deliver it. So it's not necessarily like you're going to be the product manager of the credit card, of like how you approve credit and how it works, but you are going to be partnering with a team, right, that does that, and you're going to be figuring out, how do I enable that, and how do I harness some of that data to make this better for my customers. So we align around, we take those physical products, right, and then we trace back like, what does it take to deliver them? And where are the gaps, right? Like, where are the opportunities for us to develop digital services around, I hate that term digital, but like, how do we develop like online services or software services around there, right? To really turn this into a better value production for that product. So there's probably going to be components of actually increasing that physical product. You got to make that better. But then there's always a delivery mechanism and the managing mechanism of how that product gets consumed or delivered or used or stuff like that. So if you're thinking about like credit cards, right? You've got your credit card division, you've got all your different credit cards. There's teams thinking about rewards, there's teams thinking about like credit approvals, what's the right, how to target people. But then there's all software teams behind the scenes going, how do I use the data to make sure that I can surface better offers for my users, right? How do I give people the ability to manage their accounts? Like Capital One in the US is a very large credit card company. They saw that they saw from a business need, right, that tons of people were calling in to put in travel notifications. And they said, we actually have enough data to predict if somebody's traveling or not. Let's get rid of that. So now, like, I don't have to go put travel notifications there. It tells you when you go on the website that that's what they did. But they just automatically do that, right? So that's the software team behind the scenes thinking about how do I increase the value of that physical card through the services and the products that we actually offer through it. So it's really like aligning about that and thinking about increasing value of that physical product through all the adjacencies that you can.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Melissa. We've been talking for an hour. I think it's time we give your voice a rest before we head out. So firstly, thank you so much for Melissa for spending the time with us and giving us so much fantastic knowledge. Just before we all process out, we've got a couple of small things to do. Firstly, Pratam, do you want to, our wonderful host here at Napier provided this fantastic theatre. I wish he'd been here when I was a Napier student. Pratam has a course in project management, agile project management. He'd like to talk about for a couple of minutes.
My name is Pratam Chira. I'm the program leader for the current MSc in project program management. What I want to do is actually ask you for your help. Okay? Hello?
Hello? Yeah, that's better. So what I want to do is to ask you for your help. We are thinking of producing a new Masters in Agile Project Management. And I understand some of you probably are already objecting to the project management title. So that's exactly what we want. That's the kind of feedback that we want. Okay.
At least it's not a 2-day course.
So what I wanted to say was that you've already got some questionnaires, so thank you very much to those of you that have already completed them and handed them back. Those of you that have still to complete them, be grateful if you could complete them and hand them to me sometime during the rest of this evening. Just to point out that this is a different Masters from your normal part-time Masters. This is a Masters that's actually been commended by a government body because we collaborate very closely with employers. So the key feature really is the last bullet point, that a third of the Masters is awarded for actually working with your company to deliver something. And that's actually quite good because you're actually getting academic credit for the work that you're doing for your organisation. So there's a whole, what we're trying to do is also, we're trying to not play catch up all the time. I think academia can sometimes be behind the curve, and so it's really with your help and your participation, and you'll have noticed that in the questionnaire I've asked for your contributions and if you'd be willing to be contacted. The idea is to build something, and we might call it Agile Software Development or we might call it something else, but we want to build something either at undergraduate or at postgraduate level that is actually going to deliver value to organisations. So it'd be really great if you could fill in these questionnaires, and it'd be really good if you could tick that box that says you don't mind being contacted to participate further in the development of this course. And that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.